Hello and welcome to this video on financial reporting. My name is Huzaifa Hedri and I am one of the senior lecturer at PwC's Academy Middle East. The papers that I teach at PwC's Academy are mainly ACCA FR, which is financial reporting, and the SBR, which is strategic business reporting. So my expertise are mainly in the area of financial reporting and corporate reporting. I'm an ACCA member myself and I have been in the training business for more than 8 years. I've been delivering training on these financial reporting papers and the corporate reporting papers for quite some time now. And I want to, in this session, talk to you about that what are the key areas about this paper ACCA FR, which are some of the troublesome areas for the students and they are not able to tackle them well as per the examiner comments in these areas. So I will be giving you a bit of a guidance in this particular session that how you should be tackling those areas in the exam and what are the best approaches that you guys can take in order to tackle those areas in the exam. So there are three key areas that we are going to be talking about in this video, which we are going to be covering as far as the paper FR is concerned. So when we talk about what are those three areas going to be, so the first key area, guys, as you can see on the screen, is going to be the compound financial instruments. Now, compound financial instruments, guys, is one of the key area when it comes to the testing in the paper ACCA-FR, and this relates to the accounting standard IFRS 9 financial instruments. The second thing is the discussion on the area of deferred tax. So briefly, I'm going to be telling you about what exactly is deferred tax and how we are going to be dealing with the deferred taxes when it comes to the paper FR. And of course, how is it possible that we deal with the corporate reporting paper, we deal with the financial reporting paper, and we do not talk about consolidation? So, I mean, like, this is definitely not possible. So, we definitely will be working on the area of goodwill, and I will be giving you a bit of a guidance on what is the partial method of goodwill and what is the full method of goodwill and how the workings are done and how we cover on these areas when they are being tested in our exam, because most of the times students they end up making mistakes whenever the goodwill is being tested in the objective questions areas. They are not able to understand the mechanism, or they are not able to understand the requirement of the question well, as a result of which they end up getting the wrong answer, which they believe is the right answer, but effectively that's not the right answer in the exam. So let's start with the first area of the discussion today, guys, and that is going to be the working on the area of compound financial instruments, IFRS 9 and financial instruments. So what exactly do we have in the compound financial instruments? First of all, you need to understand this thing, guys, that what exactly are compound financial instruments, and then I'm going to be talking to you guys about their accounting treatment and how it needs to be recorded in your financial statements. So first of all, compound financial instruments are those instruments, guys, which are going to show you the attributes of both equity and financial liabilities. And the classic example that we use of the compound financial instruments are convertible bonds or convertible loan notes. Because when the company is issuing these convertible bonds or convertible loan notes, the option of conversion is with the holder, which means that the investor has the option to decide whether they will be taking their money back and they will be collecting their amount back, which they have given to the company as a loan, or they are going to be converting their amount of loan into the equity. So the company doesn't know over here what exactly the investor is going to do. The company doesn't know over here what exactly the option holder or what exactly the loan note holder is going to go for. So from a company's perspective, it has both the elements. It has an equity element as well as it has the liability element. So what is the accounting from our perspective? Because we are playing the part of a company, we are playing the part or role of a company over here. So what we need to do over here is from the day one, on the very first day, at the inception of these convertible loan notes, of these compound financial instruments, we are going to split the amount between equity and financial liability. So how do we split that? That is exactly the working is about. So when we talk about, guys, the split that is being done over here, first thing you need to understand over here is this, that examiner can ask you two types of questions from this particular area in your exam, specifically in the objective questions. Number one, either the examiner can ask you the value of the equity or the value of the liability at inception. What does that mean at inception? At inception means that at the point, at the same date when you have issued these bonds, at the same date when you have given away these bonds into the stock market to the investors. So at that date, what is the value of the equity and what is the value of the liability on the day one? Or the examiner can also ask you the value of these liabilities and of these equities at the end of the year. So now you need to understand this thing. The value of the equity will remain unchanged. We will not do any changes to the value of the equity after we have calculated on the day one initially. But of course, the value of the liability needs to get updated and needs to be moving on an yearly basis, and the method that we are going to be using for the liability is going to be the amortized cost method. So let's move into the working, guys, that how we are going to be finding the value of the liability and the equity from the total value. So this is the working. Now, what needs to be done, guys, over here? First of all, you need to see this thing, that what is the total amount of proceeds that we are getting. Because as I said, guys, the company is taking the loan over here and we are playing the role of the company in this situation, right? So since the company is taking the taking the loan over here, what does that mean? It means that the cash is coming in to the company, cash is flowing in to the company. So we have to see from the total cash that we are receiving, what part is the liability component, and after deducting the liability part over here, guys, the balancing figure is going to be my equity component, right? So the whole game over here is to do the calculation of the liability component. Now, how do we do the calculation of the liability component? So guys, as I've mentioned over there, that we need to do the calculation of present value of the future cash flows. So the question is that present value of the future cash flows, fair enough, but what are the cash flows that we need to discount? What are the cash flows that we need to bring down to the present value? So guys, whenever we talk about any liability, there are two main cash flows which are associated with the liability. Number one is the payment of the interest, and number two, the redemption value, which in most of the cases is going to be your principal amount, right? Now, there are two things, guys, that I want you guys to understand over here. And what are those two things? Okay. First of the two things is the cash flow. So whenever you want, and this is where people make mistakes, so I want you guys to understand this part very clearly, that there are two things over here, cash flows and discount rates, right? Because to calculate the present value, we need two things, we need the cash flows and we need the discount rate. So the one which I am highlighting in the yellow color, guys, these are my cash flows, right? So to find the cash flow of the interest, we will use the nominal value of the loan and the nominal percentage. And of course, redemption value is just one value. So that is straightforward. At whatever value we are going to be redeeming the loan, whatever value we have to pay back to the holder, that is going to be considered as my redemption value, right guys? But when we talk about the discounting, okay, when we are going to be discounting these cash flows, we have to use the effective percentage of interest. So the green color highlight that you see guys on the screen, that is the discount factor. So the main discussion that we have over here is basically the discussion between the nominal percentage and the effective percentage. So let me explain you in a very simple manner what exactly is the nominal percentage and the effective percentage. Guys, nominal percentage is just the amount of the interest that you are actually paying or receiving. So it just represents your regular installments being paid or regular installments being received. But that is not the only cost that is generally associated with the loan. So for example, guys, as I'm saying, the nominal percentage will only represents interest paid or interest received, but it is not going to represent the other costs which are associated with the loan. For example, the discounts, for example, the premiums paid on the principal value at the end of the loan, for example, the transaction cost. All these items are also related to my loan. So we need to include them as well and spread them as well over the life of the loan. And for that, the real percentage of interest, guys, the actual percentage of interest, which is the interest, because money over money is interest. Okay, so we need to record that and discount that these cash flows using the effective percentage of interest. So in a nutshell, guys, nominal percentage of interest is just the face value, whereas the effective percentage of interest is the actual amount of interest that is being charged on this loan. And remember that this is the percentage of interest which actually goes into my P&L as my interest income or interest expense, not the nominal. So in a nutshell, guys, in a simplified, summarized manner, nominal percentages are used for calculating the cash flows, and effective percentages are used to discount cash flows. So let's take an example on that one over here. On 1st of January, a company issued 400,000 convertible 5% loan note at par. So guys, again, what do we have over here? So in this example, what is the case? We have got a 400,000 loan at 5%. Guys, this 5% is my nominal percentage with interest payable annually in arrears. The loan note, the loan is convertible in 4 years time. So the life of the loan is 4 years, right? Into equity shares on the basis of $100 of loan for a note for 10 equity shares, or it may be redeemed at par in cash at the option of the loan note holder. Of course, guys, I told you this thing that this is always going to be the case, that this is the option of the loan note holder. But a similar loan note without the conversion option would have required the company to pay at an interest rate of 8%. When they say these kind of percentage, market interest rate, similar loan note without the option of the conversion, so this is known as your effective percentage of interest, right? Then the present values of $1 receivable at the end of the year based on the discount rates of 5% and 8% can be taken as follows. So I've told you this thing already, guys. Okay, I've told you this thing already, that there are two percentages. One is effective, the other one is nominal. And which one are we going to be using for discounting? For sure, guys, we are going to be using the 8% for discounting. So if you see, every time in the question, guys, they will give you the discount rates for both the percentages. But I know this thing that the nominal percentage is not going to be used in my calculation. Therefore, guys, this is what? This is your distractor in the exam. Ignore that, right? How are we going to be doing the working on the uh, initial value and the initial calculation, guys? So there are total 4 cash flows starting from 2008. 2009, 2010, and 2011. Why do we have 420 guys in the last year? Because in the last year we are also going to be having the principal value, which was 400,000, as well as the interest of the last year, which is 20,000. But the question is that how do I get this 20,000? So as this 20,000, as I told you, how will you be getting your cash flow? Your cash flow will be calculated on the nominal value. This is going to be 400,000 multiplied by 5%. So when I use the nominal percentage, that gives me the cash flow. But when I talk about discount rates, guys, the discount rates will be using the 8%. So I multiply the cash flow by the discount rate and get my present values. So present value for year 1, 2, 3, 4. So the total value of the debt component is 362,400. The total cash that we have received, the proceeds, were 400,000. Therefore, the balancing figure, this is going to be my balancing figure, guys. This balancing figure is going to be the value of my equity. So what should be the journal entry in your financial statements? The journal entry, guys, in your financial statements is going to be cash debit 400,000 because you're getting cash, equity credit 37,600, and liability credit $362,400. So this is how, guys, you are going to be doing the working as far as the convertible loans or compound financial instruments are concerned. I hope this clarifies your doubts now. Let's move on to the second topic. Ooh, a funny one, isn't it? So when we talk about, guys, the deferred taxes over here. So guys, deferred taxes, which is IAS 12, is generally a topic, income taxes, which is not liked by the students, not preferred by the students, majority of the students at the FR level or even sometimes at the SBR level, because the nature of this topic is as such that it is a complicated one. So now, when we talk about, guys, deferred taxes over here, what exactly is deferred tax in the first place? So you should understand this thing, guys, that deferred taxes are nothing but the accounting adjustments between, for the differences between the accounting profit calculation and the taxable profit calculation, right? So this is to make up for those temporary differences between the accounting treatment of an item and the tax treatment of the item. For example, what can be an example of a temporary difference? Temporary means something which is going to exist for a certain period of time and then it is going to vanish away. So when I talk about, guys, temporary differences, for example, let's say if I am selling something on credit, what would be the journal entry in my financial statement from an accounting perspective? So I follow accrual accounting. I would definitely record receivables debit and revenue or sales would be credited. So when I'm hitting the sales in my P&L, my revenue and my profitability is increasing. When my profitability would increase, my tax is going to increase. But the tax authorities are saying, I am going to record it as an income in my taxable profit only when you will actually receive the cash. So I am working on accrual basis. Tax authorities are working on cash basis. Both of them are recording. But the difference is that one is recording on accrual basis, the other one is recording on the cash basis. Therefore, guys, this creates a temporary difference in the financial statements, and this temporary difference always leads to the deferred taxes, right? Because tax always, remember this thing, guys, that the tax is paid based on what the tax authorities are telling me, not what I want to pay for the taxes, right? But when I will be reporting the information in my financial statements, the information will be based on the difference will be deferred taxes, right? So there are, guys, going to be three areas which are going to be affected of your financial statements with the working of taxes. First, of course, is, guys, your tax expense. So tax expense goes in your P&L, and There are three things, guys, which will go in your tax expense: the under or over provision, which is the difference between what you actually pay and what you have provided for tax in the last year; current year's provision for tax; and the movement in the deferred tax. Here, common mistake that people do, guys: movement in the deferred tax basically means you have to see what was your opening value of the deferred tax and what was your closing value of the deferred tax, and the difference between them goes in your income statement. Because this is a very common error that people make, guys, that they take the closing balance of the deferred tax in the P&L, forgetting the fact that the P&L is prepared for 1 year, whereas the closing balances, they go into the balance sheet as the closing amount, right? So three things: under or over provision, current tax, and movement of the deferred tax. But what is under provision and over provision? How will you identify that in the exam, guys? If in the exam you have under provision, what does that mean? That last year you recorded lesser amount of tax, so this year you have to adjust for that by increasing the expense. So this is always going to be on the debit side of your trial balance. But if last year you have recorded too much amount of tax, and this year, guys, you need to reduce that to adjust for the difference, that is going to be over provision and will be provided and recorded on the credit side of your trial balance. Then in the non-current liabilities, guys, as I have mentioned, you take the deferred tax, but you have to use the closing balance. Yeah. Whereas for the current tax, guys, use the current tax value, and this is always generally given to you in the question. You have to take it as it is, guys. Okay, you don't have to do any calculation for this one. Generally, you have to take this one as it is. Okay, so let's take another example on this one. Now, the following trial balance relates to ABC company as at 31st of December 2014. So, guys, current tax this time is on the debit side. Okay, left side is known as the debit side of the trial balance. So if it is on the debit side, guys, I will highlight and understand this thing. Oh, this is my under provision of tax, and guys, this is the credit side. Therefore this is my deferred tax liability. If it was on the debit side, it would have been my deferred tax asset, but here it is deferred tax liability, so credit side. The balance on the income tax account in the trial balance represents the difference between income tax estimate of 2013 and the actual tax paid. We know this thing, that's why we have called it the under provision of the tax. The directors have estimated the income tax for the current year end 31st December 2014 at 8.6. So guys, this is my current year's tax provision, and the required deferred tax provision for 31st December 2014 is 7 million. So this is my closing balance of deferred tax, right, guys? So opening value of the deferred tax is 6.2 million, ending value of the deferred tax is 7 million. Therefore the movement in my deferred tax is 0.8 million. And since, guys, the liability is increasing, this is my expense in my income statement. If the liability would have been decreasing, this would have been my, if the liability would have been decreasing, guys, this would have been my income in my P&L. But this is increasing, therefore expense. So under provision, we have to increase the expense. This 200 is my expense. Increase in the liability, also expense, and current tax is always my expense, unless they say that it is a tax refund or it is my tax asset if they claim that, or tax income if they claim that in the question, right? So in my tax expense, guys, I have recorded this is going to be my expense of 200. Why, guys? I'm explaining each value one by one. So this is my expense because it is under provision. I have recorded less amount of tax, so now I am going to increase the expense for the current year. Current year's tax expense for operating in the current year. And how do I get, guys, this 800? I've told you my closing balance was 7 million and my opening balance was 6.2 million. So the difference between them, which is 800,000, again, I'm working for P&L. You always take the movement in the P&L as your expense, guys. Okay, and the last working, guys, was about the closing balance of deferred tax, which is 7 million, goes in your non-current liabilities, and the value of the current tax, 8.6 million, goes in your current liabilities. So these are the three things, guys, that will be affected in your financial statements every time you are doing the working on taxes. And that's the key to success of treating taxes, guys, in the working of or in the paper of FR. So the last discussion, guys, for the day, which is goodwill, which is being discussed according to IFRS 3 business combinations. So important working, guys, because when we talk about goodwill, goodwill is one of the integral working of your overall question on consolidation. And generally, guys, people don't realize this thing, that goodwill carries a good amount of marks in your exam, because if you are getting about a 20 marker on the consolidation, where you might have to do the working of goodwill, so out of 20 marks, guys, you definitely would be having about, let's say, for example, between 3 to 5 marks being allocated to the goodwill. So 3 marks out of 20 or 5 marks out of 20, it's coming to a good proportion approximately, guys, between 20% to 25% of that question belongs to the calculation of goodwill. So you should be good in that, guys. The easiest way of understanding what exactly is the goodwill, whenever any parent company is paying anything over and above the value of that company. So for example, A company is acquiring B company. A company is paying $10. The value of the company is $7. So that extra $3 that I am giving is going to be considered as my goodwill. And there are two ways of doing the calculation, guys, of goodwill: proportionate method and full method or fair value method. There's a very clear difference, guys, between them. Okay, and I'll explain that to you. What's the difference between them? Now, if I have 80% share of any of the company over here, so I'm sure, guys, that the remaining 20% that is going to be owned by the group of investors, they are known as the minority interest, or you can also call them NCI, non-controlling interest. So what happens, guys, over here? Whenever we are going to be doing the working on the goodwill, according to the accounting standards, we've got two methods of goodwill: full method and partial method. Full method is that method which helps us calculate the goodwill of parent as well as the NCI, which means that in the full method, the goodwill that I'm going to be calculating, in that goodwill, a certain amount belongs to the parent and a certain amount belongs to the NCI. Whereas when we use the partial method, it is that goodwill which belongs to the parent only. So the share of NCI is not there in between them. So how do we start with that, guys? We take the amount of consideration that is absolutely same in both the methods. Then, guys, we add the fair value of NCI, and I am going to be highlighting that, guys, because that is where the difference is, guys. Okay, I am going to be highlighting that because that is where the difference is between the two methods: the calculation of fair value of NCI at the time of acquisition. And then after adding the two figures, consideration and NCI's fair value, we minus the value of the net assets, which gives us value of my goodwill at the time of acquisition. So how do we do the working in that case? So guys, in the case of this, what's the difference? So as I told you, the difference is in the calculation of NCI, because consideration will be same, net assets calculation will be same, only the NCI calculation is different. So guys, if we are following partial method, or also known as the proportionate method, we will take the net assets, the same net assets which are here, and we multiply them by the percentage of NCI. Like in my example, if I'm having 80% of the company, then definitely the remaining 20% is going to be with the NCI, right? So whatever my net assets are going to be, and net assets means what, guys? Some of the people are not even able to comprehend the meaning of the net assets, right? So net assets means assets minus liabilities, which gives you what, guys? Which gives you equity. So you have to remember that in the net assets, I have to take the equity values: share capital, share premium, retained earnings at acquisition, revaluation reserves, other components of equity, and all the items which belongs to the equity. But remember, this is a very, very common error, guys, that people make over here, that they include wrong values. Guys, remember this thing: goodwill is always calculated initially at the date of acquisition, which means that, guys, all the values that you will take will be those values which are at the date of acquisition, right? Now, that's how we do the working, guys, of the NCI and the partial method. So what happens in the full method? We take the shares owned by the NCI and we multiply them by the share price of the subsidiary. So let me take an example over here so that you guys can understand how this is actually going to be implemented in the exam, right? So Eric acquired 80% of the 80% of the $3,000 one equity share of Ernie Company on 1st of January 2005 for $10,000. So what is this 10,000, guys? This is my consideration when Ernie's retained earnings were $3,000. So guys, these are the retained earnings of Ernie at the date of acquisition. The fair value of NCI at acquisition was $3 per share. So guys, we have to use the share price to find the fair value of the NCI. Calculate the goodwill on the basis that the NCI at acquisition is measured using either the proportionate method. Okay, it is going to be calculated using either the proportionate method or the full method of goodwill. So my consideration, guys, is 10,000. So I've taken that as it is, 10,000 in both the cases. Now, how am I getting the net assets? I'll come back to the NCI calculation because that's where the difference between the two calculations is. So how are we going to be getting the value of the net assets, guys? So as I told you, net assets includes your equity. So what needs to be included? So we have $3,500 one shares. So my share capital is 3,500 and my retained earnings at acquisition were 3,000. So that is going to include, guys, over here. We are going to be including over here 3,000 plus 3,500, right? And the same goes over here too. Now, how are we going to be doing the working on the area of NCI? So in the partial method, okay, in the partial method, what we are going to be doing, guys, over here in the partial method, we are going to be taking the value of the net assets and multiply them by the percentage of the NCI. Guys, I think the calculation has been replaced the other way around. So what needs to be done over here? 3,500. The value over here is going to be in the partial method, that is going to be 6,500, which is my total value of the net assets, and then I am going to multiply that by the calculation, or you can put it this way, guys. I think the names have been replaced. This is actually the working of the partial method, right, where the numbers have been replaced. So it is just the other way around, guys. So you can put it this way, that this is the working for the partial method and the full method over here. So what needs to be done now? The 6,500, when I am going to be multiplying that by 20%, I am going to be getting 1,300. And when I will be using the share prices, which is 3,500 shares of the company, 20% belonging to the NCI multiplied by the share price, which is $3, that gives me 2,100. So in the full method, we are using the share prices. In the full method, we are using the share prices, which is 3,500 multiplied by 20% multiplied by $3. Whereas when we talk about the partial method, guys, under the partial method, we are taking 6,500, which are the net assets, and we multiply them by the 20%. So what is happening over here? That under the full method, the goodwill that I'm getting is 5,600. Whereas under the partial method, the goodwill that we are getting is 4,800. And remember this thing, guys, this is always going to be the case that whenever we are going to be doing the working for the full method and the partial method, the value of goodwill under the full method will always be higher as compared to the value of goodwill under the partial method. And why is that? That there's a very simple logic behind that. There's a very simple reason behind that. Guys, I told you that full method is that method of goodwill which includes the goodwill of the parent company as well as of the NCI, whereas the partial method is that method of the goodwill which only includes the goodwill of the parent company. So the share of NCI is not there. So of course, when we will take out the share of the NCI, the goodwill under the partial method is going to be lower as compared to the goodwill under the full method, right? That's pretty much the three discussion points. A very important point, guys. All three of them are extremely important, and those areas where people generally end up making mistakes, guys. So please make sure that you understand these 2 points well, these 3 points well, and I hope that this session is going to help you a lot in order to understand all three of them, which includes the compound financial instruments, the key area to differentiate between nominal percentage, effective percentage. Then the working for the IAS 12. Remember, in the tax expense calculation, we take the yearly values, whereas in the balance sheet, we take the ending values. And for the goodwill, the calculation, mainly the differentiating point is the working of the NCI. Like over here, for full method, guys, we are using share prices that out of the total shares, 3,500, 20% belongs to the NCI. Then we multiply them by $3 share, value of the share. Whereas for the partial method, we are taking the total net assets and then we are multiplying them by the percentage of the NCI. So I hope this session helps you guys a lot, and I hope that this helps you to pass your exams with the flying colors. This is me, Huzafa Hedri, signing off. Thank you very much.